Coach, I love doing these interviews with people that you've become friends with through your work in media and coaching. We've had Chris the Bear Fallica on before. Glad to bring him back on today.
Yeah, one of our most requested guys, and I was hoping we were going to bring him on this week to celebrate a Georgia victory, but unfortunately, he was right last week. He told me he had a feel for that game, and he certainly picked it right. But just a little bit of intro here. Chris and I go way back. The only issue I got with him, he still busts me about Miami beating us at Oklahoma. But other than that, of all the guys, when I first got up there, he was behind the scenes man at ESPN and just put me with the right people and was always putting people on me to help me with these, all the notes and everything. And then we've kept up through the years. And, of course, he was very good to my wife and just a great friend. And, Chris, seriously, man, give me a loan. You're the man there with Fox. I mean, I got to be impressed with that. What a move. You were one of the most sought after guys in free agency, weren't you?
Yeah, it worked. It worked out well for me. And friend, echoing what you had said earlier, you make it very easy to be a good friend. That's for sure. We have a great time talking not only college football but tennis as well. I got the Center Fritz on match on right over my left shoulder right now as well. So we'll give you some. I'm sure people love that when you're like recording a podcast or a show and then they're listening to it 2 days later and we're watching Center Fritz over here from Turin. But
which one you got? Who you got on that one?
I bet Center. I have no issues laying a big number, so I think indoor hard court in Turin, that's going to be a tough ask for Taylor. But yeah, no, a couple of weeks, my contract was up at ESPN a couple of years ago, and Fox came in and made me an offer, and ESPN had an opportunity to kind of step in there and match or maybe come close to get a little bit of a hometown discount. And unfortunately, the finances with ESPN at the time couldn't quite get there. But it wasn't necessarily that. I mean, and I've told you this for a while, and people who know me know I'm a big horse racing guy. I'm a big soccer guy. And with Fox having that summer, they had the Women's World Cup. We had the Euros this past summer. We got the World Cup coming up in 2026. Women's Euros, with Fox has the Belmont Stakes now. It was really an opportunity as well for me to not only to get involved in college football on the Fox side as Big Noon continues to grow, but kind of reacquainting myself and covering some events that ESPN used to have in the World Cup and horse racing. I tell people all the time that like the best thing that I have ever been involved in my working in sports media was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. And to have an opportunity to be back in Australia a couple summers ago for the Women's World Cup, and then in 2026 when the World Cup comes here, it's going to be awesome. So yeah, everything that's happened since I made the move is reaffirmed that I made the move. I still have a bunch of lifelong friends on that game day set, and now I've made a bunch of really good friends on the Big Noon set as well.
Yeah, the only negatives is you can't come to Athens with Big Noon and go out to the club and all that. We did some good groceries there, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We the club, and then I think I sealed the deal on a couple of recruits one day out there on that patio.
Yeah.
I forget that was good.
Yeah, we had a couple of recruits in, and Will Muschamp said, "Coach said I don't want to hold this against you, but these parents want to meet the bear." So it was good, and we told them that all the recruits come in, they get the chance to meet the bear. So that was that's what took it over the hump.
That's the biggest problem I have with where I am right now with Fox and ESPN and how its lines are divided. ESPN, ABC, that's the SEC network. Big Ten, that's the Fox network, and the fact that we don't get a chance to go to Athens for a big SEC game or some of those other SEC campuses and Baton Rouge and Tuscaloosa and Knoxville, like that does hurt. But hey, look, we did have a chance maybe in a couple of years we'll see what happens. I know we've gotten some big SEC teams. We had Alabama in Wisconsin this year. We had the Texas-Alabama game in Austin a couple of years back. So we'll see. Maybe if Georgia has a non-conference road game at a Big Ten campus, we'll be there for that.
That'd be great. So right off the bat, we're going to talk Georgia here in a little bit, but just from your perspective with the 12-team playoff now and the way it's all shaken out, I mean, early on we could speculate and all, but can you see 4 teams from each league, Big Ten and SEC, being in there?
Yes, easily. I think there's a path potentially for the one of them to get potentially 5 and maybe 3. Maybe you get 5 and 3. But I mean, I think Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State are in for sure. And I think if you look at the Big Ten, what Indiana does next week in that game in Columbus is going to have a big say into what happens in the rankings. Like if Indiana goes to Columbus, look, Nebraska nearly went to Columbus and won. Like if Indiana goes there and plays that type of game and they're close and they lose, I think you're going to have a hard time moving them out of the top 12. But if they go there and they get blown out, and then you do a deep dive on their schedule and their resume, you're going to be looking at an 11-1 team who played one really good team in Ohio State and they didn't win it. Their 11 wins came against no ranked teams and probably not even a team that's going to be getting a vote in the poll at the end of the year. So at that point, it's just going to be up to the committee to say, okay, we just think Indiana is better than say a 10-2 Georgia or a 10-2 Tennessee or a 10-2 Alabama. Name your pick from the SEC. But I think there is a good chance, because I think if you look at the Big 12, you're probably just going to get the champ. Even though I will say if SMU is kind of around, and you're looking at a debate between maybe trying to figure out SMU or BYU as an at-large, you got to take BYU over SMU because BYU did go to Dallas and beat them. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think obviously you've got the Group of 5 team. You've got the ACC, which I think is now a one big lead with Miami losing a regular season game. And then I don't want to say, Timmy B always likes to say the fly in the ointment. Like Notre Dame could be potentially the fly on the ointment as well. Like I watched them and I don't know really how good they are, but they did go to College Station week 1 and win. They do have a win right now over Louisville, who is also ranked. They had the terrible loss at home against Northern Illinois as a massive favorite. They got that game at SC at the end of the year. So I think there are going to be a lot of people in the SEC and in the Big Ten and other conferences that are kind of rooting for USC to beat Notre Dame in that final game of the regular season to potentially open up a spot. But I do think there still is a path for five SEC teams and or 4 Big Ten teams to get to the playoff.
Yeah, you really covered that well. But from our perspective, just the strength of schedule that Georgia's played, even though we're not quite the team that we have been, it's got to be factored into it. But and then you look at Tennessee. Lost to Arkansas. So this game this week is huge in the grand scheme of things. And just from your perspective, if we win, do you think Tennessee still got a shot?
I think they do. I mean, that win over Alabama certainly counts for something. Sure, it was a little odd the way it happened, and they were terrible the first half, but they did beat Alabama, who's going to wind up being a top 10 team at the end of the year, assuming that they don't lose to Auburn in the Iron Bowl at the end of the year. But I would think
stop running Milroe. Good gracious. As long as they run him, it's Alabama and everybody else. He's Michael Vick incarnated, man. What a player.
And Nick, I remember Nick last year telling everybody that he was the fastest player on the team, and people were kind of no way. And then, sure enough, he is. But getting back to like the SEC and the Georgia and the Tennessee arguments, one of the things at ESPN when I was there that we were able to do, and one of the metrics that I'm most proud of is kind of coming up with a strength of record. And basically, it is what you have achieved against the schedule that you have faced. In this, you're kind of it's factoring in strength of schedule, win probability throughout the day, where you played a game, rest, all of these things. And if you look at strength of record, right now, Oregon is number 1 because they're undefeated, obviously. They beat Ohio State. BYU is number 2, obviously, because they're undefeated, and they do have 2 wins over ranked teams. Georgia's number 3 with 2 losses. And that goes to tell you how difficult – Georgia's got the toughest schedule in the country. And you've got a win at Texas, who was number 1 at the time, I believe. You got to be a blew out Clemson, who's a top 20 team. Like it takes all of this stuff into play. And I think that's the thing that I don't want to poo-poo what Indiana's done, because the goal is to go out and win games. But when you're 10-0 against the 100th rated schedule and you're what's Georgia got? 7-2, 8-2 against the number 1 rated schedule. That's what strength of record is there to determine. Like, it's been more impressive what Georgia has done against their schedule than what Indiana has done against their schedule. And that's what the committee needs to get out of this bubble. Like, oh, 1 loss is better than 2. No. And they did it last year. I will give them full credit. And I said this late in the year last year, right when Jordan Travis got hurt, and I could kind of see it coming that Alabama was going to be in the SEC championship game. And you had to take, if you were taking Alabama, you had to take Texas. That's what ultimately happened. And the bylaws of the committee in the playoff last year, with Travis getting hurt, it gave the committee a bit of an out to say, hey, look, Florida State's not the same team that they were throughout the course of the year. They lost their Heisman finalist quarterback, and they clearly were not the same team in the SEC championship game that they were with them. And that's ultimately what the committee might be in a position to do this year and say, hey, I know 11-1 is a better record than 10-2, but if you look at the quality wins and who you've beaten and your losses and the circumstances, sorry, 11-1 is not deserving. So I'll give the committee credit for that, and they're going to have to look. I would love to be. I know people say, "Oh, I would hate to be on the committee and do that." I would love to be on the committee because I love talking about this stuff. In this era of conference expansion and unbalanced schedules, I've been preaching this for you since you were back with me at ESPN. Like, in college football, especially now, 1-loss records are not created equal with all these unbalanced schedules, and that's kind of where we are right now in this sport.
Chris, I know that fans know that you do your homework when it comes to predictions and looking at betting lines. How have the factors that are different this year, whether it be with the transfer portal, rosters don't have as much depth, and we've heard coaches say that, or maybe even just because of the expanded playoff, a team like Ole Miss last week, they still believe that their playoff begins early and the team stays together longer, where maybe in previous years they're not playing as hard. How have you factored in those things to how you do your homework and predictions?
I think early on it was a little bit of a guesswork because I don't know if even the odds makers really had an idea of the effect of a lot of these moves. I'll use Florida State as a great example. Like, they lost everybody, and then they brought in DJU as their quarterback, and I don't know really what they were expecting. Like he was the same guy that he's been at Oregon State, Clemson, and wherever else. Like, I don't know what they thought they were getting, but their season win total was 9.5, and that was one of the ones that I played under immediately because I think, yeah, you look back now and the win total was done 4 weeks into the year, but I think that's the hardest thing to do. And you see some of these ridiculous line moves like before the year. I think Utah was like a 17-point favorite over BYU, and then you look at last week and they're a 4-point favorite. I'm sure the look-ahead line in Michigan, Indiana, Michigan was probably a 14-point favorite, and Indiana winds up being a 14-point favorite. So I think that's one thing that if a bettor or a handicapper has an idea of a team and can kind of read between the lines and look what a team lost and look what a team brought in and kind of block out a lot of the general treetop media noise on a team, that really has worked out. And the other thing, which I don't think the odds makers really factored in, was like how to price a team to make the college football playoff. Now, look, Georgia may lose at home Saturday, and maybe they won't get in. But like before the year started, I made a massive bet on just a two-team parlay, Georgia and Ohio State to make the college football playoff. And like Georgia was like minus 600. Ohio State was like minus 650 to make the playoff. And like it was going to take those teams losing 3 times to not make the playoff. And even in Georgia's case, maybe they make it at 9-3, depending on what happens the rest of the year. But those are some of the things that I think the odds makers even were struggling. But you bring up a good point, Dayne, about like Ole Miss last week. Like that was a game they had to have. And we were even talking about this on Bear Bets last week about how it might have been an opportunity last week to bet Ole Miss to win the national championship, because they were going to have to win that game and they were a short home dog, and you kind of felt that they had a chance to win that game, and they matched up pretty well against some of Georgia's deficiencies, and they clearly won, and the price to win the national championship got, I think, cut from like 28-1 to like 11-1 or something because of that. But the fact that you have I think right now in the top 25, you've got like 23 of the teams have 2 losses or fewer. It's ridiculous how many teams right now have a chance to say, hey, we can make the playoff. And that was one of the things that, look, I may be wrong, because before the year started, I said, yeah, we're going to have this expansion of teams that are going to get in the playoff, but I don't think we're really expanding the pool of teams that can win. Like I thought before the year, Ohio State or Georgia, no problem at all. It will be one of those 2 teams that can win. But I think now you look at Oregon, maybe they do have a chance. You look at Texas, yeah, maybe they have a chance. A team like Ole Miss, whose defensive line is as good as anyone in the country getting after the quarterback. And if Dart and Harris can get healthy, who the heck knows what's going to happen? So, yeah, from a fan standpoint, the expansion is great, because you've got all these teams that, with 2 losses in early November, know that, hey, we win 3 games and we're going to be in playoff.
Yeah, we're going to get into Georgia after this question, but you mentioned SMU now in the ACC with a unblemished record. Do you think we're going to see a situation where Miami or Clemson beats SMU and only get 1 team in, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's what's going to happen, because I think SMU loses essentially any head-to-head battle. Like if you're looking at one of the SEC teams, or you're looking potentially at BYU of Colorado or someone else to beat them in the Big 12 championship game. Yeah, I think SMU's got to win that league in order to get in, because if you look at like the conferences and how they've done against the other power conferences, the ACC doesn't have a non-conference win really to hang its hat on right now. So yeah, I think we're going to wind up seeing probably Miami beat SMU in that ACC championship game. But that being said, wouldn't surprise if Miami goes to Syracuse and is in a game and struggles or loses. That wouldn't surprise me at all either. But Canes need to get some people healthy on that defensive side of the ball. Their secondary is really struggling right now, and they've had trouble putting people in position to stay. Look, that was an embarrassing defensive performance last week. You knew Haynes King couldn't throw. They essentially ran 3 plays, it seemed like, the entire game, and ran for over 200 yards and absolutely dominated that game. So
couldn't get off the field on defense. They just, their offense had no shot. But going forward here, talking a little bit more about the national picture here, you have a chance to go inside and out. And one of our favorite guys here is Dan Lanning. And you've seen the job he's done at Oregon. But firsthand, watching him go into, going out there and checking them out, tell us about the way everybody feels about Lanning around the country right now.
Oh, I think he has kind of disproven. I think when he went there, people still had this impression of Oregon as Chip Kelly, razzle-dazzle offense, high speed, up-tempo, and kind of lacking on the defensive side of the ball, even though that wasn't necessarily the case. That 2010 team that Chip had some pros on the defensive side of the ball. But I think Dan Lanning being in an SEC type mold, we're kind of continuing what Mario had started to do at Oregon in terms of building that team on the offensive and the defensive lines. That's what he's done, whether it's been in recruiting or in the portal. He's done that, and then brought in a couple SEC speed guys at wide receiver to come in and have a big impact. In any other year, he is your runaway national coach of the year, but just because of what Cignetti has done at Indiana, I ultimately think Cignetti is going to win that award, even if Indiana does finish 11-1 and Oregon goes undefeated. But he is clearly a guy who can embrace the physicality of the game, can kind of communicate with his team in a fun, motivational manner. His team clearly buys in. Like, I loved last week when Oregon every week kind of puts out this like inside the program type video, and like week preparing meetings, game planning, all this. And like he brought up like earlier in the week, like at one point, I'm going to call you over. And it was like the gladiator moment where Oregon was up 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and he called timeout just to bring the team over to like, look at the stands. They're all empty. I told you this was going to happen. And this is what, like, that's awesome. I love a coach that can get to his team, both on an emotional, mental prep, kind of chip motivational type deal, and coach him up. I love the guy. He is the real deal, and Oregon is certainly a player for a long, long time with him as head coach.
Yeah, well spoken there. Everybody here was just fired up about him, and just a good guy off the field too. And getting into the Georgia situation, and you know a lot about them, and we do too. But I was talking to a couple of my friends earlier today. 5 of the guys that we really counted on to be uh, in the wide receiver, running back situation aren't on our team right now. Ra Thomas, Kobe Young, both dismissed for off the field issues. Roderick Robinson, Branson Robinson, of course, ETN's played some, but you take that coupled with the losses we had from last year going to the pros and to graduation, it's hard to overcome that. And then playing without 2 right guards, our first and second team, and Beck's pressing and all, but I think within the framework of it, our defense has got to do better getting off the field, and we got to get some moves from our special teams because right now just too much of a load on Beck. I mean, he's not getting any help from the receivers, and he's pressing. But what's your take on it?
Well, let me ask you, what is the status with Colby Young? Like, is he gone, or now that the charges have been dropped, is he welcome back? Does he have to go through a process? Like, what's the deal there?
Well, that's really a bone of contention here because it's up to the DA. They're going through the process, and from talking to our people, he's kind of just shuffling his feet here. It's a political issue there. They don't want to look like they're giving football any break. But hey, they ought to be fair to the kid. If she's dropped the charges, look at it straight up. But he's going to have a chance to get back. Just a question of when, and hopefully, probably not this week, but maybe by the Tech game. But the fact that this has been in since October 17th, they've been working on it, and I think the guy that represents him just finally came out publicly to put a little pressure on him. The fact that it's out there. So I mean, we got to. And you and I talked about it off air about, hey, sometimes you're quick to justify your feelings about somebody based on the accusations, but in this case, I think this kid's got a good case.
Yeah, and I remember we were talking about it as well, and after we were done, I was thinking back, like the same thing kind of happened with Matt Ariadza, the punter at San Diego State, who had accusations against him.
Wow,
and
yeah.
it looked and sounded bad, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, no, they weren't true, and charges were dropped, or whatever it was, and then it cost him a draft position and all that other stuff. And look, you and I are in agreement. Like if it's a case and he did something wrong, absolutely, you got to pay let the legal process pay out, and he's got to pay a price. But if there is, if charges were dropped, and it is what it is. But getting back to, there's no easy segue from that to the game this week. But you mentioned the defense. I think one of the things that will help Georgia's defense this week is that you don't have the kind of pressure on the defense that Ole Miss can bring to you offensively. It's a different type of offense, a different quarterback, a lot of different things that I don't think Tennessee is really built to expose a lot of those problems and potential weak spots that Georgia has on the defensive side of the ball. And that being said, I don't know what you have heard about Nico Iamaleava playing this week. I have heard that it was a bad concussion, and people that I've spoken to do not believe that he is going to play. We'll see what happens. Josh Heupel certainly offered a different tune, as you would expect him to do early in the week, to probably just have Georgia prepare as if Nico were going to play, have the college football playoff selection committee prepare to rank them as they were going to have their starting quarterback for this game. So look, maybe my intel is wrong, and maybe he is fine, and hopefully for his sake and the health of him in the long-term future, I hope that it wasn't a bad concussion. I hope he is okay, and I hope college football fans get to see him out there on Saturday. I'm sure some Georgia fans probably don't necessarily want to see him, but that still being said, he has struggled throwing the ball a good bit. Now you are facing a Georgia defense on its home field. Throw all the cliches you want out there, backs against the wall, must win to make the playoff. You and I were talking. I was talking with David Pollock as well prior to the Texas game, and like David texted me earlier in that week, and it was essentially, I'd be very surprised if we did not see the best game of the year from Georgia on Saturday, and that's ultimately what happened. I would be surprised if we don't see a Georgia defense hell-bent on looking a whole lot better, and we'll see what happens on the offensive side. But you're right. What do you guys think the biggest issue is there? Because again, I can't figure it out. Like, why Carson Beck has regressed? Is it a coordinator deal? Is it the fact that not having Colby Young and Ron Thomas as wide receivers, you don't have Bowers, you don't have McConkey from last year? Is it the offensive line injuries and having difficulty running the ball? Because you look at that first game of the year and what they did without ETN, and Frazier had an unbelievable game. Like, you thought it was just going to be continuing a great offensive season, but he is really struggling mightily. Like, is the game moving too fast? Is it too much pressure? Like, what do you guys think the underlying problem is?
Well, Dayne does a really good write-up every week on our pro called Film Don't Lie. And Dayne, what's your take on it?
I think it's all the things that you mentioned have probably created a lack of confidence that wasn't there at the end of last year. But Chris, if you go back to the first month of last season, I do think that this is probably more of a regression to the mean a little bit for Carson Beck, and what's going on around him is not as elevated to pick him up from there. So I think you're kind of seeing the worst version of it, but we've all seen, there were multiple throws in the Ole Miss game that you look at and say, those are NFL quality throws to keep drives alive. They just had, poor turnover, a batted ball at the wrong time, but they were one big play away from changing the entirety. Yeah,
everybody's got to pick it up. It's not just Carson, but he's got the weight of the world. I mean, the 152 straight games, and now, we got people around here reading the riot act. I hate to even go into a fast food place. I need to start wearing a disguise because everybody thinks I got all the answers.
No.
But
seriously, people coming up to you at all times. You got all the answers.
Right. I'm just, what are you going to do? But anyhow, we're closing up here. So give us a little bit of intel as far as what you think as far as the pro draft stock of Sanders and some of these other quarterbacks going into the draft.
Well, I bet when I was out in Indiana, I have to think back to what state I was when I made what bet, because in every state you bet different things in different markets that are available and not. I bet Shedeur to be the number one quarterback in the draft. Number one pick in the draft, rather, back then when we were in Indiana. I got it like plus 650, I think it was. It might even about had a boost. I was able to get a better number. You talk to people surrounding my show who have spoken to NFL people or played in the NFL. Like Mark Ingram has said, like, if you put Shedeur Sanders on one of the traditional bloods in college football, and he's the quarterback at Ohio State, or he's like quarterback at Georgia, like it's a runaway. It's not even he's the runaway Heisman Trophy winner, number one pick in the draft. But it's still that little bit of, okay, he's Deion Sanders' son. He's playing at Colorado, and people don't necessarily want to believe that he is. But he is his ability to lift that team up and the weapons he has at wide receiver behind an offensive line that isn't necessarily great. He's fantastic. I think his ability to improvise, and I think he has dispelled a lot of those not rumors, but kind of myths and perceptions out there that, oh yeah, he's just Deion's son. He's really not any good, but he is really, really good. And I think he will be the number one pick in the draft. I think Cam Ward is not. Look, I'm a Miami guy, and I hope Miami wins the ACC, and I hope Miami makes the playoff. I don't see Cam Ward as a first-round pick. I think he is way too many turnovers, presses a little bit too much. Not sure if he has an NFL arm in terms of strength. Now, look, we've seen a lot of guys go to the league with questionable arm strength and done well, but I wouldn't be rushing to take him in the first round as well. And I was a Carson Beck guy. I thought he was a guy who could have been the number one pick in the draft, and he would have been probably a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick had he come out last year. And he came back, and we'll say, look, you guys follow the draft and the sport well enough to know that every team out there is in search of their franchise quarterback, and a lot of times they take them too high. Examples: Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and some of these guys who now probably may never play for their teams again after this season. So someone will be in. It only takes one. Tim Tebow went in the first round. So like these teams will see something and think they can be the team or the coach or the quarterback coach to be able to get the most out of these guys. You're going to have Quinn Ewers probably going in the first round as well. So you probably will get 4 guys next year. But I think if I'm drafting first overall, I think Shedeur is the clear number 1 pick right now if you are in search of a quarterback. And we know that's what kind of goes number 1 these days.
Chris, take me back to the days when Coach Donnan was at ESPN with you, because I have these off-air experiences with him. He's become a really close family friend for me and my family. So I think I know a lot of what those days were for you and a lot of the jokes that come from that too. Take me back to those days with some stories.
Remember, because those were back in the days when we had the ESPN news studio, which was like right off to the side of the research room where myself and Brad Edwards, who coached Noakes, and some other guys who were in research. So like, it would be like, yeah, you'd come out of the room and it would just be like a continuation of the conversation that he would be having on air, wound up. Can you believe? And then we'd segue into a little bit of sport, a little bit of who do you like in this one? What do you got? What are we rooting for? And a lot of those conversations still go on today about who do we like this week? Who do we got? And fortunately for Coach, I had a good week last week, so hopefully we continue that this week. But it's just, it really isn't like one story, because it was just every week, every time Coach was there, it was just like a kind of a familial friend conversation where it wasn't like a lot of times you'd be in awe, like someone would walk in, whether it's a former athlete or an NFL analyst, or, oh, this is, I wasn't Randy Moss, like just throwing that name out there. Oh, wow, that's right. Like, and you'd be intimidated, but Coach was always approachable. And a lot of times you didn't have to approach him. He was approaching you because he was genuinely curious about your opinion and your take on something. Like, did you disagree with what I said on there? Am I wrong? And he would always be looking for, like, I don't want to say reassurance, but he would like, okay, am I wrong here? Am I right? Like, am I missing something here? It was a genuine conversation, whether it was just a joke or looking for someone else's opinion. And that's what made it so easy to be drawn to Coach Donnan, because just the person that he was just an easygoing guy that even if he wasn't on the ESPN set talking college football, he's someone you want to go hang out with, go to dinner with, and just sit around, watch some games and shoot the shit and make fun of for a couple hours. And unfortunately, I'm still winding him up about Miami, Oklahoma, 20 years later.
He can pull my chain pretty quick. I got to be careful because we got a little open deal with Stanford Steve and him, and they always throw out stuff about. And
I think he thought I was going to wind him. I was winding him up before, because last night I was working on my Bear Bites notes, and I had a note in reference to BYU being 9-0. And they were only a field goal a favorite over a team with a losing record on their home field. And I went back and was looking, and over like since 1978, there've been like 60-something instances where there has been a team 9-0 or better on their home field against a team with a losing record. And this is the first time BYU, Kansas, where a team is not a double-digit favorite in one of those games. I went back and looked, only like 3 of those games have been decided by less of a touchdown. And one of those games was 1987 Oklahoma against Missouri. And I'm like, wow, what the hell happened here? I immediately texted Coach. I'm like, 1987 Oklahoma, Missouri. Tell me what the hell was up with that. And this morning he finally got back to me, and he's like, oh, yeah, it was the first game. Jamel got hurt. Charles Stubb, we lost our running. Like, I didn't know any of this. Like, there was a clear reason why. I'm like, oh, it makes sense now.
Yeah, we got after Nebraska the next week. Never will forget, Switzer made a talk on Thursday. He said he asked the defensive players if they were going to go on the trip, because he said it like this. He said, I know that everybody's saying Jamel's not going to play, Lydell's not going to play. And he started asking these defensive players, are you going to go on the trip? Is there any reason for us to go? I mean, does our defense not count? And then finally everybody just got jacked up. And I never will forget this, Bear and Dayne. And this was like 20 minutes into practice on Thursday. And, you know, Thursday's a big day. You want to get ready and do everything. He said, I tell you what, I don't even think we need to practice. We're going to kick their ass. Let's go home. But our kids went running off the field. I said, God, we hadn't even gone through the script or nothing. But it was one of the best things that's ever happened as far as a pep talk. And we ended up going up there and beating them 17-7. Unfortunately, we ended up playing your team in the championship game, and they beat us, which they deserved.
20-14. Right? It was a good game.
It was good, and Charles wouldn't hand the ball off. He tried to keep it the whole game, and they were so fast they caught up with him. But well, hey Bear, we're really proud of you. You got a great following down here around the country, and when you would go out with me down here, just the way all these people would come up to you and just embrace you, kind of embarrassed me because I don't even think they knew who I was. But we're really proud of you and really appreciate you being on with us today.
Of course, anytime, and let's do it again once Georgia gets into the playoff. We'll talk about their chance to potentially win that. See what I did there? I already laid the 8 this week and played on.
Made everybody feel good about that strength of record when you said Georgia number 3, because we got some people here lower in well manure right now. We got to get them up. So
exactly right. Big win Saturday. It'll all take care of itself.
All right. Thanks a lot.